Hi everyone. Thanks for coming out. Is it still raining? No. Okay. It was pouring when I came. So my name is Rob Sylvan, and I grew up in New Jersey, just over the George Washington Bridge. So coming back to New York feels a lot like coming back home. Even got to go over and visit my family the other night. It was very nice. For the last 15 years or so, I've been involved with stock photography, and that's kind of how I got into the whole Photoshop track and Lightroom later on. One of the main things I do, and over most of that time, was I provide help desk support for Kelby One, formerly NAP. And so if anyone is a Kelby One member or a former NAP member, and you've ever sent in a Lightroom question, I probably answered it, because I get all the Lightroom questions that come through there. And I feel very honored to do that. As a kid in New Jersey, I always wanted to be a superhero. And apparently that is as far as I've aspired in the superhero world, is to be a help desk person. But I've learned a lot from that experience of helping people. And I really try to pass on all of the collective wisdom of those that have gone before you and made all the same mistakes that you're probably making now, or the assumptions that you've made that have turned into a self-inflicted wound. And so I try to come to this presentation with that perspective. I write books. I've written, I don't know, probably a dozen or more books on cameras and Lightroom and even Photoshop. I have a 10-hour video on Lightroom CC through Peachpit Press, and I'm actually working on a book right now called Taming Lightroom that's all about how to help you get your Lightroom under control. Things like renaming your catalog, moving to another computer, getting folders organized, understanding that relationship between the catalog and your photos. So hopefully that'll be out sometime this summer. Obviously depending on me finishing it, so I am definitely motivated. My publisher, if you're watching, I'm definitely right after this, totally writing. So my goal here today is to help you understand how does this Creative Cloud plan for photographers benefit you? What's involved, and how is it different than just maybe what we were used to using in terms of software? I get lots of questions, and being in the optic floor at the trade show, I see many faces that have come by our booth there. A lot of people are asking, what is the Creative Cloud? Why is it different? How do these programs benefit me? What's the difference between Bridge and Lightroom? So I'm going to try and address those things, but I'm definitely leaving time at the end of my presentation for your questions. I know it's really important. Hopefully you have some. I also understand and appreciate, and have been on the other side of this, that as an audience member, when someone else is asking their very in-the-weeds question about their very particular, unique situation, it's really kind of hard to listen through it. So I'm going to ask you all to equally give each other patience and a little bit of space to ask your question at the end. If you want to get an answer, I'm happy to try and answer it. But sometimes you got to kind of bear with some of these questions. Trust me, I've been answering questions for a long time. I know how it goes. But if I can give you some new information and answer some questions and maybe give you some tips to help you prevent some problems down the road, and then I feel like I have done my job here today. So let's talk about the Creative Cloud photography plan and what's included in there as kind of a jumping off point. So I started in this realm using Photoshop, Bridge, and then when I started shooting RAW, the Camera Raw plugin. All right, and for many years, that's probably many of us have used, and it does a great job of all those things. The people behind those products said, hey, so now we got this people shooting RAW so much, why don't we develop a tool that has the power of that Camera Raw plugin for processing RAW photos, but has a workflow that's really designed and intended for photographers and not for anyone else. So Photoshop is an amazingly wonderful, powerful program, but it serves a lot of different disciplines. The graphic designer, a photographer, an architect, forensic person. I mean, many different people use Photoshop every day. So that's where Lightroom was born from, was this need to kind of harness that Camera Raw power for processing RAW files to really, we have all that data that we're capturing when we're shooting in RAW, Certainly can still use it with JPEG and even TIFF files and PSD files and now PNG files and even video. But Lightroom really at its heart was for photographers who are shooting RAW to help them get their photos from their camera into their computers and through a workflow that included the culling stages, the picking the winners, picking the best of the winners, moving them on to being processed, and then out into the world, whether it was making prints through the print module, making a web gallery with the web module, making a book now through Blurb, slideshow, or just good old-fashioned exporting copies. All right, you need to send some JPEGs to somebody. All right, we need TIFF files, whatever that might be. Lightroom was set up to take those parts of Photoshop and Bridge and Camera Raw and put them in a seamless workflow that we could, for the most part, stay largely in Lightroom. Over time, now we start having these things that people call cameras and phones or whatever they are. And who knows what they'll be in 5 years from now. And we've got cameras that fly around us, and there'll probably be ones underwater. I mean, who knows where all this is going. And so not only do sometimes these cameras take pictures, but they also now are computers too. And now we're looking at images that have been taken on these devices as well. So I have an iPad Pro here, I have an iPhone, my wife has an iPad, she has an iPhone, she has a MacBook, my son has an iPad, people have Android tablets and Android phones. So now we have all of these devices that are not only capturing content, viewing content, maybe even creating content, and potentially even editing content. And so Adobe is trying to take the long view and say, okay, so we have all of these customers and potential customers who are using all of these tools. They have images here and images there. They want them all, they want to be able to access those images no matter what device they're on. They might want to be able to capture them on some device and have them brought over to another device. Or created in a regular old camera, brought into a desktop just like we've done for many years. But then at some point, maybe in a more relaxed setting, do some of that work on a tablet, all right? And so from that perceived need, Lightroom Mobile was born, and this Creative Cloud model also came along, all right? So what is the difference between the Creative Cloud and what is called the perpetual license that we might have been used to? So in the good old days, a new version of software would come out and we would shell out whatever that amount of money was, and we would get a license to use that software for as long as our computer would run it or whatever, what have you, okay? We didn't actually own the software, we just paid a license in one big fee and never had to pay again. With this subscription model, the things changed, and so now we have an option to pay an annual fee. And so right now, for this photography plan, it's $119 annually, or it's $9.99 a month. And I will say, in case I forget, so B&H is having a show special that's good until June 10th, where you can save $20 on that, so 2 months free on that plan, all right? And so by changing the way that we pay for the software, it also changes the way that the software kind of gets delivered to us and how often it gets updated and what can happen in that update. And so while Lightroom actually still exists as a perpetual license also, there is still a Lightroom 6 product, and it is, for all intents and purposes, the equivalent of Lightroom CC 2015. It's a couple little differences there. But as far as the old Lightroom that we know, it's kind of the same. So earlier I was asked a question about what do I do if I'm using Lightroom 6 and I upgrade to Lightroom CC? Well, right now they're the same. Okay, so it's not like you're going from an older version to a new version. You're just kind of running in a parallel situation. By having this Creative Cloud and this new way to deliver the software, it is also opening up new opportunities to connect our devices together. All right. And so what I'm going to show in my presentation here is how you can capture, maybe on your phone, maybe capture with your DSLR or your mirrorless camera or what have you. Maybe you capture on your iPad. I always feel like a tourist in National Park when I do that, but you could do it. But however you're capturing your images, you can maybe bring them in through Lightroom in a mobile environment, or you can bring them in through your desktop. Now, you'll hear me call Lightroom desktop. I don't mean specifically a desktop computer. That's kind of the way their products are getting separated out. There's Lightroom Mobile, think any mobile device. Here, Lightroom desktop, think whatever your computer is, okay, laptop or desktop. All right. And so for me on this trip, I thought it would be a good example as I took the bus down from New Hampshire. I was taking pictures with my phone as I went. I was taking pictures with my DSLR as I went as well. And over that time, I was putting them into my main Lightroom catalog like I always do. But at some of those times, I was bringing those photos in through my mobile device. And other times, I was just sticking my memory card into my card reader, and they all ended up in the same place. Right? Another benefit of that is that we're starting to see some of these other products that are included in the Creative Cloud plan. We have Adobe Slate, which just went under a name change to Adobe Spark. So in the middle of preparing for this, I'm like, why is Slate? And go to adobeslate.com and it says Slate is now changed to Spark. Okay, so things happen. So this is not. So here's what I want you to keep in mind. Okay, everything I'm going to show you today is going to keep changing. It just keeps evolving, whether we like it or not, and it will continue to do so. And that's kind of the nature of this new environment. And so an update for Lightroom Mobile came out yesterday. A new update for Lightroom Desktop, both 6 and CC came out today, and the Camera Raw plugin, whenever that happens. But like many of your apps that you have on your mobile devices, we get updates to those all the time, and we don't think anything of it. Well, now that we have the subscription model, both Lightroom, Photoshop, and our mobile apps can be updated that frequently too. And we have seen a few new features appear inside of Lightroom CC since Lightroom 6 and Lightroom CC first release. So one most well-known example is probably that dehaze slider. All right. That is one of the differentiators that's not in Lightroom 6, the perpetual license, but it is in Lightroom CC 2015. All right. So we're starting to see this kind of change, almost like our desktop apps are becoming more like mobile apps. Right. But because of this connectivity between the cloud, okay, whenever I say cloud, just think of computer someplace else, not actually up in the sky yet. And that connectivity between our devices is enabled by these computers in this other place where our images, or some copy of our images, is stored. All right, and so I can look on my mobile device and see a photo that was a raw photo in my desktop catalog, and vice versa. And I can maybe even edit it. And then, maybe for output purposes, I could even start putting it into a website because it's already up in the cloud. I don't need to re-upload it from my computer again. So we'll show you how to do that. All right? All right, so let's take a look at these tools. So this is this iPad right here, just kind of running it through QuickTime, so that's why it looks like it's on my laptop. But really, I'm working over here on this iPad, all right? So don't be fooled by the tricks I'm doing over here. All right, so this is Lightroom Mobile, all right? And what is the benefit of Lightroom Mobile? So people often ask me, even yesterday it was asked. So Lightroom Mobile is not intended, excuse me, I'm a little raw from talking so much these last 2 days. Lightroom Mobile is not intended to replace your desktop computer. Okay? At least not entirely. It might offer new options for workflows to consider, but it's not meant to just take over, right? It doesn't offer the same tools and functionality, okay? It's not as powerful. Obviously, this is brand new MacBook Pro. Even the iPad Pro is not as powerful as this in terms of computing power, right? So it's not a replacement. It's an option and it's an extension if you choose to use it, right? When I first learned of Lightroom Mobile, it came out for the iPhone first, and that's kind of how I used it. And I was like, okay, it's a tiny screen. Maybe it's bigger than my camera screen, but still a pretty tiny screen. This is a 5S, so it's getting a little long in the tooth, right? But what it enabled me to do right from the beginning was a really easy way, if I take a picture on my phone, to have that automatically land on my desktop. The full res JPEG copy of it, boom, it's in my desktop, okay? And that was pretty cool. And so the way Lightroom Mobile worked for me was just kind of as a conduit. brought things from my phone into my desktop. But then it also was a way to like say, hey, so I want to have a portfolio that's kind of mobile, all right? And so I want to, bore you with my photos. I will pull out my phone. As soon as somebody does it, you're like, oh boy, here we go. And so I pull out my phone, and I can show you photos that I have in my Lightroom catalog right on my phone. Right? So that was kind of cool too. And so however you kind of find a use for any of these products is entirely up to you, but that's what I always try to do. How can this work for me? And that's kind of how I got started. So the way that Lightroom Mobile connects to Lightroom on your desktop is through regular collections. All right, that's kind of the point where they meet. So in my desktop catalog here, I have, let me just collapse this top panel, and I'm going to collapse this up here. I'm just trying to give me a little more room so we can see my collections panels here. And I'm also at the age of putting on spectacles when I look. All right, and so you see that I have two collection sets. Now, I want to kind of put this caveat out there that we have about a little over an hour of time to show you about 7 different products. I can teach a 2-day workshop on Lightroom alone, okay? So I can't go too deep into any one of these. And so I'm going to assume a certain familiarity with Lightroom. And if I say something that you're really not getting, ask me at the end of this, and we'll circle back, and I'll try and make sure that you leave here with an understanding of that. But I'm going to try to move at a higher level, okay? So I apologize if anyone at the moment gets left behind. So we have at the top here, this is a collection set, container for collections, and then I have under it just some regular collections here. And I have one collection set that I call From Lightroom Mobile, and I have one called To Lightroom Mobile. And that was just how my brain thought, okay, I'm going to put some collections here that are going to go from my desktop catalog up into Lightroom Mobile, and any collections that are kind of coming from my mobile devices are going to go in this other one. That was just how I thought it made sense to me. That is not how you have to use it, okay? I'd love to find some other ways, and maybe you have a better way, or at least a better way for your mind, okay? So these are just regular collections, the kind where you make a collection and you select some photos and you drag and drop them right on in, okay? Lightroom Mobile does not sync with Smart Collections. Maybe it will, okay? It just doesn't do it yet, all right? You can't sync a collection set, just regular collections, all right? And so I already had all kinds of collections, and so if I wanted to have one of those collections be available to me in my Lightroom Mobile app, if I let me just make a new collection here. I'll go up to the library menu, go to new collection. And there's at least 2 ways, always more than one way to do anything in Lightroom, but I'll just call this my New York collection for now. All right, and down here under options, we have a couple options. One is include selected photos. So if I made a big selection of photos from my New York trip and I wanted to make a new collection, I could make the selection first and check that box, and boom, that all happens in one step. All right. I can set it as a target collection, which is a really handy feature if anybody's ever used that. Up in the catalog panel, there's what's called the quick collection. And if you press the B key on your keyboard and a photo selected, it gets added to that quick collection. Well, if you set any regular collection as the target collection, that B key sends the photo to that collection. So it's a really cool way. If you make a new collection, you don't have all of the photos gathered up yet, but you just want to go through your catalog and just hit the B key a few times and boom, populates them right in there. So I use that a lot. But the checkbox I wanted to point out was this sync with Lightroom Mobile. So every time I make a new collection, I have the option to have that new collection start syncing right away with my Lightroom Mobile, okay? But if I don't include that for whatever reason, that's okay. All right, I click Create, and now we look over here in this left-hand side next to these other collections. See that little kind of lightning bolt-ish looking icon? Can't tell you what it's supposed to be, but with these, that's kind of what it looks like. But my New York collection, there's just an empty box. All right. So anytime there's a regular collection in your collections panel with an empty box, that's not synced with Lightroom Mobile. All right. But if I wanted to sync it, all I have to do is put my cursor over it and see how that appears, and I just click in there, and now that is going to be synced to Lightroom Mobile. And that's all there is to it. Now I can add new photos to that just by dragging and dropping into that collection, and those will also sync up to it. Okay. So that's one way. That's kind of from your desktop, all right? From your mobile device, so this is not connected to this contraption here. So if I just open up Lightroom Mobile, on my phone here. And I appreciate in the back you can't see this very well, but trust me, it looks just like that, except smaller, okay? Same collections are there, all right? Everything, options-wise, are all the same, okay? And my internet connection here is all run through the hotspot on this, so not the fastest collection speed, but it is what it is. So if I just look in here, my New York one has not appeared just yet. But what happens when you sync something with Lightroom Mobile, if you start with your desktop, it goes up to the cloud and then comes down like a gentle rain today into all your other mobile devices, okay? And so I happen to have an iPad and an iPhone. If I had 10 more iPads, I could have them all synced through that same Lightroom, through that same account, all right? So what's really cool, and this is what I did all this week, is I had a collection. I'll bring it up here. Oops, I always do that when I have it. That doesn't work. All right, so here's a collection I made for just this show, all right? And if I open up that same collection here on my phone, inside the mobile app, there's actually a built-in camera, all right? And so, sorry, your feet are having their moment of fame. But what I would do is when I wanted to take a picture with my phone and have that picture added right to that collection, I would open the collection first, then I would open that camera, all right? And then I would take a picture, all right? Now that picture will be added to that collection, all right? And now it's going to upload into the cloud, and it's going to come down here. So are your feet okay with being on the screen for a moment?
You're okay. Can you need a waiver?
Foot waiver. So what's cool about this now is Lightroom is not just this conduit between things, but you actually have Lightroom in your camera to a certain extent. All right, and so some of the things that we can do on here, we can change white balance. All right, we could even do custom white balance. So if I find a neutral spot here, okay, I can set a custom white balance that way. We can have different grids for visualizing things. There's even a built-in level when you're in the national park and you're trying to get Old Faithful to be upright. All right. There's even the ability to apply some presets right from inside the camera itself. All right. And so any pictures that we take from inside that app get added to the app. I just like to start inside a collection that I know they're going to be in. Otherwise, they just kind of go into this. Up at the top here, we have this Lightroom Photos collection that just shows all the photos that you have. Kind of like the all photographs in the catalog panel, where you have that kind of long view of everything you have in there. All right. So if I wanted a photo to go right into an individual collection, that's where I would put it first. All right. So that's all kind of cool and interesting. So what else can we do? So let me just go back to this this collection I created for the show. So when you're looking inside a collection, whether it's, this has 150 or so photos, or it could be just 2 photos, or just the one like I made, all right? I think that it's always something that maybe is in flux. We can use kind of the functionality of touch, okay? So all these apps, while they try to mimic or give us some functionalities that Lightroom has, remember they're on touch devices, so some of the ways that we interact are also based on touch. So for here, we have a 2-finger touch. If we do a 2-finger, we can cycle through the different information that's available to be displayed on our thumbnails here, all right? And if you can't see in the back, but trust me when I say that some of these have an NEF file extension and some of these have a JPEG extension. So this collection is a combination of photos that I took with my DSLR and with my phone, all right? Now, we're not necessarily or really seeing the full resolution RAW file is not in my iPad or on my phone, okay? So what happens is when I include any photo to be included in this Lightroom Mobile, is this Smart Preview technology that we talked about a little bit before our presentation. But Smart Previews are a special kind of DNG file that takes the best part of RAW and the best part of JPEG compression, and it makes this smaller version of your RAW file. It can be, in this case, we have JPEGs as well. But by making this smaller RAW file and using it in this way, we're able to do some edits, like that white balance, to our RAW files while we're in our mobile devices. And those edits are being transferred via that Smart Preview. All right? So when I make some changes here in my iPad, that information, those instructions, go up to the cloud, and then they come back down to my desktop catalog. All right? And so and it goes both ways. So anything I do on the desktop to any one photo, well, I'll see reflected in the mobile device. All right? And so that's the way that Adobe shows how these things can kind of be available on all our devices, even though our RAW files are still on our hard drive somewhere. Okay. All right. And so there's just some more information you can cycle through. All right. Another thing you can do inside of the mobile device is kind of that culling stage. All right. And so I have been kind of shooting as I went along. So there's there's a photo of the bus I took down and the teeny tiny room that I'm staying in, but has a great view. So that's kind of what I'm paying for, especially at night. So I walked around, and so those are photos that were taken, either with my phone or with my DSLR, and I've just been adding them in. And you can see that some of them, that have a check mark, those just have a pick flag. All right. So if I go to that same collection here on the desktop, all right, we can see those photos that we were just looking at. Some have a pick flag, some have a star rating. Okay. That's the same information. It's being kept in sync between. So if I make a change to a star rating, all right, and let's just go to the rating part here. So we can see below the photo we have, this has 4 stars and it has a pick flag. All right. I can also just drag right on the photo itself, and I can set and change the flag state. All right. So if I change that to a reject, that information goes up to the cloud, and then eventually will filter back down to my desktop catalog. All right. So one of the workflows, like I went to the photo walk at the Central Park yesterday. It was a lot of fun. Met up with one of my friends who was supposed to be here, Levon. And we walked around. I'd never been that part of Central Park before. And I did a lot of shooting with my DSLR. I did shoot with my phone as well. When I finally got back to my room, I was kind of tired, and I just threw the card in here. And right from the get-go, let me switch over back to the desktop here. Okay. Pull that card out of here. So it's just shooting with this little guy. I pull the card out, and even though those photos are already in the catalog, I just want to point out that right from the import dialog, you have the ability to add photos right to a collection. All right, so what I did last night is I popped the card in just like this. I went to add to collection. I selected my optic collection that's already been kind of working on. All right, and then I clicked import. And then I grabbed my iPad and went downstairs to get something to eat. And so this process is going, all right, on the hotel Wi-Fi. Got my iPad with me, and I'm sitting down, and as I'm eating, I'm seeing those photos starting to appear in this collection. All right, and so now as I'm just kind of eating and maybe having water, I can go through these photos, and I kind of undid everything that I did last night just so we can kind of start over again. And let me switch. If I don't switch devices, let me know. Okay, sometimes I'm getting them confused because I'm seeing the same thing on both screens here. So you should see my iPad now. All right, and so I could decide right inside the app, okay, is this going to be a keeper or a reject? All right, and whether you're the kind of person who deletes your rejects or you just like to flag them and, I don't know, say a prayer, I don't know, whatever you do, I'm a deleter. If you're a keeper, that's fine. I'm not dogmatic about how I use Lightroom, okay? I'm not. I make fun, a little fun, but I really, as long as it makes sense to you, then you have my blessing. When you come to me for help, then I'll tell you, I told you so. No, I won't do that. But no, I've helped so many people and seen so many different ways that people use the software. As long as it makes sense to you, really, that's all that matters. Don't let anybody tell you there's always one right way. There's lots of wrong ways, but there's not necessarily one right way. Okay, so as I want to go through these, I can add a flag or add a reject. I can also just tap right down below and add a star rating or take away a star rating, okay? If I kind of press and hold on this photo, this little pop-up menu appears, and if I wanted to, instead of that speed flagging where I was moving my finger up and down and the flags were appearing, I could change that to rating. If rating's my deal, I want to apply star rating, I can do that. Or there's speed review combined where over on the left here, I can do my flagging, and over on the right, I can do my rating, okay? So if you have a system that you use for stars and flags, then that's what you would use, all right? So what's cool here, if I tap on this title of this collection up here, we can see that there's actually some filtering options, all right? And so if I wanted to say, flag this particular collection with, and just filter, and just see all of the photos that don't have a flag yet. That's similar to how I work on the desktop. I want to see everything that I haven't made any decision on, and then I go and make a decision. All right? And so now I can decide, all right, is this one a reject? Now I'm on to the next one. All right? This one a reject, maybe, and this one too. I'm being kind of harsh, but that's okay. All right? Nothing against the ducks, but, this was a really cute moment, and so, okay, maybe I like this one, but Dad's expression's not that great. All right? And so let's just keep one so I have some keepers in here. And as you can see, all I'm doing is swiping up and making a decision, flag or not, flag or not, flag or not. All right? As I do that, this collection is getting smaller. All right? Because every time I apply a flag, it no longer meets the filter of unflagged, and it goes away. All right? So I can kind of continue to go through here. As long as I don't choose the unflagged state, the photo will move. And that's kind of my goal, is to kind of get through these and know that I've made some decision one way or the other. And because I'm applying flags, applying a reject flag doesn't automatically delete it or nuke it or anything like that. It just reminds me that at some point I didn't like it. All right? And I can always change that flag state later. All right? I actually like that one. And then the same would happen as if I chose stars instead. Okay, maybe stars are my thing. You can choose which is the thing you want to do. All right. So all of that information, as I've been doing that, let's cancel out of here, starts to filter back to my desktop catalog. So by the time I'm done eating dinner, I get back up to sit down at my desktop to do the real work, right? All that part has been done. Now, you might have a complaint about doing work while you're eating dinner and looking at screens when you're eating dinner and all that. That's totally fair, all right? I was by myself, okay? Wasn't ignoring anybody at that point, all right? But the idea here is that we now have an opportunity to extend some aspects of our workflow to those times when maybe we're a little more down, just a little more casual. Maybe it's on a flight, all right? Or on that bus I took down, and we'll be taking tonight, back up to New Hampshire at 6:30 tonight. This is a new opportunity as long as there's internet involved, as far as, at some point, the connection has to be there. I don't need to be on internet to do the work. The internet has to happen to do the communication, okay? And to the question earlier, it's like you don't need to have internet connectivity to run Lightroom on your desktop either, or Photoshop, all right? If you subscribe to the CC plan, and you'll just download and install the software just like you always did, it'll be through this other application manager, but you're just installing software like you've always ever done, or uninstalling software as you've always done. All right. And so this is who is supposed to be here, but she's not. But yeah, everyone knows Levon. So what else can I do? Let me go back to the mobile here. While I'm in this mobile environment, okay? So flagging and rating is nice, okay? not much to write home about, but it's a nice thing to do. So we can also make more collections while we're in the cloud too. And so one of the things I always just kind of do is if I find a sky that looks kind of like a nice sky, I'll just take a picture of it and I'll just kind of file it away. If I have a lot that I could delete. So here, these two pictures of the sky were that was before it rained. The sky was looking kind of nice, and so I have a skies collection, right? And so if I want to add those photos to the sky collection, I'm going to choose this Move To option here, and I can then select those, all right? And now I can find skies collection and move them over there, all right? Now, if I had been shooting on my phone, I would have maybe gone to the skies collection and shot those skies, but I was shooting with my DSLR, and they just all came into the one collection. So just because you put photos in one collection doesn't mean they're permanently there, all right? You can kind of move things around, and I certainly, could have done that a different way. But I just brought them all in, and as I go through this, if I decided that there were some that didn't belong in this collection or another. And what I like about shooting with both my phone and my DSLR is when I was in certain places in the park, let's not worry about that right now. If I wanted to know where that was on the map, all right, by shooting with my phone, although my camera actually does have GPS, but I don't ever use it, the JPEGs that I take with my phone have the GPS information included, all right? And so now I know from this particular shoot exactly where on the map inside the Lightroom map module those photos were taken. All right, so that's one of the reasons why I shoot with my phone, just to kind of have that little marker automatically happen. And then I could just add the other photos that were taken in that, just drag them right onto that same spot on the map. All right. So that being said, let's look at some of the other things that we can do while we're in this mobile environment. So imagine I'm still eating dinner. Maybe it was a long dinner, but I don't want to go to that one. Stop doing that. Hey, oh, I know why. It's because it's still trying to. All right, let's turn off my filter, because that was really kind of that wasn't a very thoughtful filtering job, flagging job I did there. But I just wanted to kind of take you through that. So this was a photo I took with my phone, and I really liked that this woman who was just not a photographer, who was actually one of the few people not a photographer there. It's nice when they show up to be in our pictures, right? So all you need is a bunch of people standing around like this. But there were photographers in the background, all right? Well, at least I'll blame that they're photographers. Maybe they weren't. Maybe they're just visitors. But I like that she was wearing the same color as the roses that she was sitting by. It was very, very thoughtful of her. But there's a person in the back, right by that statue there, that I didn't like. And that would be something like you would think, oh, I could do that out in Photoshop, right? Well, and you could. But what's cool is that one of the other apps that we now have access to is Photoshop Fix. Now, Lightroom Mobile is a free app. Okay, you don't actually even need the Creative Cloud subscription to use it. You need the Creative Cloud subscription to sync it with your desktop catalog, but it's a free app. Photoshop Fix and Mix, these apps are free, but again, what we're paying for here, what we're getting is the synchronization between our apps and the Creative Cloud. And there's even more ways that we're going to see that these are available, all right? And so what I could try to do, maybe if I just want to see if it's worth doing, is seeing if I can just take her, thinking it's her, out. All right, and so, there's somebody else over here too. So with a 2-finger kind of zoom there, I'm just zooming in, and I'm just, with my finger, just kind of painting on where her head is, and Photoshop Fix is just doing all the work of just kind of like the spot heal tool in the regular Photoshop. And so instead of having Photoshop Mobile that had all of Photoshop into a mobile app. What they looked at instead was how can we what are the tasks that people try to do? And can we take those Photoshop tasks, those tools that power Photoshop, and make an app that just does that task? So if you need to do that task, you go to that app, and then you come back to Lightroom Mobile. And that's where we have Photoshop Fix. Think of that as your fixing app for retouching types of things, healing and liquify. Those are kind of the main things you do there. All right? And then we have Photoshop Mix, which is where you actually can do some compositing. You can do more advanced editing as well in there. But it's a little bit more targeted for just those different tasks that you might do. And because of that connectivity between the cloud, you can send it, and then right up at the top here it says save, right in this blue part here, it says save and return to Adobe Lightroom. So I made those changes, and that version of the photo appears back in Lightroom as a copy, all right? And so that was a JPEG that I shot with. Originally, it's a JPEG copy. If I shot with a RAW file, it's not gonna give me a copy of the RAW file, okay? Could you hold it to the end, just so we can keep going? All right, and so here's that version with those people removed from the background, all right? Something I only ever, well, I guess you could do that in Lightroom. I tend not to use the spot removal tool in Lightroom just because I so much love the tools in Photoshop for removing things that I tend to do it. Sensor spots I'll do in Lightroom, but a lot of the, more heavy retouching, my retouch muscle goes to Photoshop, all right? But Lightroom certainly has improved much more in that regard. All right, so that's one of the things you can do right from Lightroom Mobile. Now we go to Photoshop Fix and we come back and we can continue on in other ways as well. So let's just see one that's a little interesting. As I was walking back, I took the train down to Times Square and was walking through Times Square. I intended to go back out and did not make it back out. This is the one photo I took in Times Square. And, it's busy, there's a lot going on, and this guy was really doing a great job on his makeshift drums. But I wanted to, how can I, clear away some of the clutter? What's the potential in this image, if there is any? All right, so right from this editing menu, I'm going to put a copy to Photoshop Mix. And so Photoshop Mix is this other app where, hey, you're supposed to bring it on over. There it is. Okay, so there's the image right from Lightroom Mobile over inside of Mix. So maybe, cropping is definitely something that needs to happen with this image. I don't know if it's because of my hands or what, but I've lost my ability to touch my screen here. Let's see if the looks will work. No, something has happened where I've lost my electrostaticness. Never fails when you're doing a demo. That's something.
You should always update your software before.
That's right. I did update this yesterday. I don't think I can blame them though for that. Something about my fingers. Let's try that again. Send to Mix. Okay, that's better. Okay, hey, there we go. Go figure. All right, so we just crop this down a little bit. And what we have in Photoshop Mix are what are called looks. All right, and so everything you do inside of Mix is non-destructive, so we can kind of play around with stuff and undo it, kind of like we do in Lightroom Mobile. So I just play around with something here, and if I wanted to, my goal here is just to see if I can bring our eye to the main subject more and less on this very distracted background. So wondering if I maybe brighten him up and darken the rest by using one of these looks to see how that would work. So what we can do with these looks is actually paint them on a certain part of the photo. And so Photoshop Mix is very smart in this regard, and I can just start to paint, and it's recognizing the edges, and now it's applying that look just to the part of the subject that I'm touching over. And I can zoom in to get a little bit better. And if I go over, like I just did there, I can switch this over to subtract, and I can pull it off of there. All right. Like there's, it wasn't until I zoomed in that I saw he was wearing a Muhammad Ali shirt too. All right, so now I've kind of, done some things to try to set him off from the background. Just kind of quick stuff. Maybe this is just more of like experimental mock-up. I don't need to pixel peep too much to see, did I get the edge just right? But is this something that I want to keep? Maybe explore further inside of Photoshop itself. All right. So now that here I am in Mix, I have a few different options for what I can do from here. So one of them is I can save this right back to Lightroom. Okay. I can send it to Photoshop CC as well. When you're working in Mix and you start to add, you can actually start to add layers to your image, you have the ability to send a copy, a layered copy, right to Photoshop CC on the desktop. And it takes this information and it does whatever it does, magic to it, and Photoshop can understand it as a layered document. All right? We might lose some things in the translation, like the looks may not be editable and that kind of thing, but we might still have our layers and our opacity and that kind of thing. So that's pretty cool. So if I wanted to add another layer, maybe I'll look inside of Lightroom, and Photoshop Mix can access all of my collections that I have inside of Lightroom Mobile. So I want to look for another photo to add on as another layer on top of it. I can go inside of my collections here. Let's see, I've got one here for textures. Maybe I can make it feel a little grittier, or add some lights. All right, so I'll just select, these are just photos that I happen to have added to a collection at some point in time. They're up in the cloud, and Photoshop Mix is able to access those. And I'm not going to resize the canvas, but what I can do is just with 2 fingers kind of turn it and open it up like this. And now if you see over on the right-hand side there, we have these are my layers. Right? I'm starting to build out a layered document almost like I was using Photoshop. All right, maybe I'll adjust this and maybe just desaturate it a bit. All right, and now maybe let's apply a blend mode to it and bring the opacity down. Maybe it's more like now it was raining like it was today. So now as I start to add layers and texture, cropping, and doing all these different edits inside of here, I can save a copy back to Lightroom. That's great. If I wanted to continue working with these layers, I could actually save right to desktop, Photoshop version on my desktop. Go to sleep on me now. Here we go. So the more things that we do, let's see if this, so I'm going to try and see if I can send this to Photoshop. We'll see if, how well that transfers on my phone's data, okay? So this is all coming out of my data plan. But we'll give it a try for the sake of our demonstration today. So now it's rendering out this layered PSD version of this that I'm all doing all on my iPad Pro, which is kind of amazing if you think about where this is going. What I always want you to be thinking about with this stuff is this is not the destination, okay? This is just where we are on the journey at this moment in time, all right? It's going to keep going. Just try and put yourselves in Adobe's shoes and think, okay, if they're doing this now, what else might they be doing down the road? Because there are people now working on stuff that's really cool that we have no idea what it is, all right? So we come back into Lightroom Mobile. And let's see, while things are moving over, let's see if we've had any success with, here's Photoshop. So we'll let that work. So obviously your strength of your internet connection is going to be a big factor in how fast these things move about. I am still connected. Okay, good. My phone still has battery. Good. All right. But that kind of availability of our files across all of these different mediums is what makes this really interesting. So here, when I saved that photo from Mix to Lightroom, it created, or this already existed for me, but if it didn't exist for you, it would create a new collection called Photoshop Mix, and that photo that we just worked on as a JPEG form got sent right to Lightroom. Okay, so this isn't the layered version here, but this is a JPEG version of that photo that's now it's already come down onto my desktop. All right, so that's pretty cool. All right, let's look back over here. All right, so while that's all happening, let's say I finally finished dinner, got back to the room, and I had gone through my edits. What's so great about Lightroom? What can Lightroom Desktop do that we can't do in the mobile yet? Well, there's actually quite a lot. And while I can't go over everything, one of my favorite things to do is a relatively new feature called Photo Merge. And so one of the last pictures I took last night was through that wonderful view of my teeny tiny room out over what must be parts of Hell's Kitchen in the theater district. I'm not really sure, but I was looking for Daredevil, did not see Daredevil. So now back on Lightroom on the desktop, I have now all of the tools and power of Lightroom on the desktop. I've made my calls. Oh, hey, that just popped over. All right, so while I were working, I got this little notification that that layered file that I just worked on in Lightroom Mobile, Photoshop Mix, has just come up and down, and there we have the layers that I added, the selection that I made, all right back as a PSD file. That's pretty cool. Yeah. So this is pretty amazing too, at least I think. This is one of my favorite new features, okay? So now we have this ability inside of Lightroom to merge multiple exposures into an HDR file that the end result is actually a DNG file. It's still a RAW file. All right. We could also, if I had done a pano, I didn't have that much room to make a pano in there, but if I had made a pano, I could stitch all the frames of my pano together, and the resulting file is still a RAW file. So what does that mean? All right. When you have a RAW file, it means you can change the white balance. All right. You can set the camera profile. What does that mean? Well, when you pick up your camera, it's probably set to whatever the engineers at whatever camera company you bought your camera from thought was a good look. Standard, neutral, portrait, landscape, whatever, okay? Some of us customize those. Maybe we increase sharpening or contrast or colors or something like we might pick a certain film for its characteristics. Maybe we pick a profile for its characteristics. If you shoot with a Fuji, there's like a bazillion of them. Sony probably has more as well. I know for my Nikon, we've got camera standard, camera portrait, neutral, flat, monochrome now is coming out there. Okay, Lightroom doesn't understand those instructions that we dial into the camera, all right? But inside of Lightroom, we can have access to some built-in profiles that simulate those looks. Okay, they're not exactly, but they're a good step in that direction. Right? So with a RAW file, we can still change that. With a JPEG, we can't change that. Right? We have more opportunity to change or to apply lens profile corrections to RAW files. There are some for JPEG, but most of them are for our RAW files. So by having the finished product be a RAW file, we still have access to a lot more editing power than we would have if we had to render these out as TIFF files and then save them out that way, which is what we had to do in the past, and which is still a fine workflow to do. There's nothing to say that you can't still do that. There's some great plugins for HDR. Photoshop's HDR functionality is still great, but I love this in Lightroom. I can take 3 exposures I just shot on a bracket and say, hey, Photoshop, Lightroom, can you take those 3, merge them into one DNG file so I have all that data to play with? Sure, that sounds like a good deal. All right, and it's pretty easy to use. So the auto-align box, you might as well just always check. I wasn't technically on a tripod. It was one of those fat gecko things I stuck to the window. It's suction cups. It's really cool little deal. And so it didn't move. I fired it remotely, so I'm pretty sure they didn't move, but I usually have auto align checked anyway. And then auto tone, it's just like auto tone in the develop module. You can use it as a starting point or not. This is just intended to help you start at a different place, all right? The ghosting is if there's stuff that's moving in your scene. In this particular scene, there really wasn't much moving. Didn't even have any clouds at the time, so I'll leave that set to none, but if I did, I could try to take those ghosts out. And so what Lightroom is doing now is taking that data and merging it together, and as soon as it's done, I will have this HDR, and if you look, I'll make it a little bigger, see it in the back row, it says DNG. It's still a DNG file. All right? So if I press the D key and head to the develop module and don't get a beach ball, all right, here we go. So now here we are in the develop module, and if I go down to the camera calibration panel, there's all my camera profiles I still can apply. All right, let's try landscape, see how that looks. All right. I can still choose from my white balance options here. All right. I can set a custom or do other things too, but if I want to try one of these just to see what that looks like, all right, I still have that opportunity to do that. All right. So yeah, I'm still working with a raw file here. So I can go down to my lens corrections panel, and if I enable profile corrections, it applies a correction based on that lens, okay? That's trying to correct any distortion caused by the lens or any vignetting that might be caused by the lens, all right? So that's pretty powerful, and so at the end of the day, I usually will leave that turned on. Now I have, instead of one frame that maybe, you know, the highlights were clipped or the shadows were too dark, I could still make it look that way, but I have a lot more information, and this was the auto tone that came up with. Doesn't look that bad, all right? Can I still change it? Sure, I can still change it. I can do all kinds of stuff. I do clarity, bring up the clarity on that. You bring up the vibrance on that, all right? Zoom in, manage to get it in focus, all right? I think I'm pretty, my alignment was pretty good here, but I could even also use the transform corrections here to try and upright, if you know, to try and correct the perspective distortion. But by being up on the 25th floor, I was pretty good. I wasn't pointing upwards very much here. So just trying these to see if it does anything good, and it's not really changing it very much. So I think I was pretty good in that regard. But all those corrections I can apply now to this new DNG file, which is pretty great. So furthermore, what I often do is, so maybe that's a finished file. I still, anything that I kind of finish still gets touched through Photoshop. I still think Photoshop has a lot to offer. There's so many more tools inside of Photoshop for editing, especially retouching. You might have actions. I know I have a bunch of actions that I like to use that do different tasks. So an action is a way to record a series of steps and then play them again, so you don't have to remember all the steps every time. You just click a button and it plays through the steps. So for example, for an image like this, I will send that to Photoshop, and there's this menu, Photo, Edit In, and I can edit in Photoshop CC, okay? There's a keyboard shortcut, which I highly recommend. That's one that you'll learn. And this is my international sign for applying a keyboard shortcut with your thumb and your index finger. So I would send this to Photoshop, right? That is a Command E. And there it is. All right. So when I send something from Lightroom to Photoshop, where I've made a bunch of adjustments inside of Lightroom, it sends a copy, especially if it was a raw file that started with. It takes the raw data, the original raw data, applies all the adjustments that I did inside of Lightroom, and then renders that into pixels over in Photoshop. Right? It has that nice interconnectivity between those two programs. At this point, this photo doesn't exist on my hard drive. And if you look up in the top here, it still says DNG file, okay? The file extension still says the DNG. Now, Photoshop can't open a DNG file directly, so we know that this is rendered into pixels. It just hasn't been saved yet. So what I want to do, anytime I send a photo from Lightroom to Photoshop like this, I just want to use the File and Save menu. Don't want to use Save As. Just go to File and Save. You could do it at the end of when you've done your work, but I'm going to do it here in the beginning, just so that we can see if I go back to Lightroom, that action of saving it inside of Photoshop not only saves the copy to my hard drive, but it adds it right back to the Lightroom catalog as well. All right. So here I went from 3 frames to 1 HDR DNG. I took that DNG and rendered it out into pixels, and now I've got that open inside of Photoshop as a TIFF file. Okay. Do you see that workflow there? How that handoff happens? So now this is my new master version of that particular photograph, right? Because that has all the data captured, all the work in Lightroom, and now we'll have whatever I do inside of Photoshop. All right. And so if I want to apply an action here, let's go to my actions panel. All right, and just a sharpen one is a good standby for actions to run. So I have this action I call contrast sharpen. If we look at it, we'll see that it's not that complicated. All right, just uses unsharp mask with an amount of 20% and a radius of 50 pixels, and it really just kind of adds some contrast in a way that looks like sharpening. So I'm going to select that there and just click this little play button. And now watch what happens both to the photo itself and inside the layers panel. So just by clicking this one button, does some stuff. Nope, look, no hands. Right? And when it's done, that was all there was to it. If I just make this fill the screen a little bit, I'm going to turn off the visibility of this new layer that appeared on top. You see it's just a little bit contrastier, a little bit sharper. Right? It's not supposed to be too intense there. It's just kind of a subtle little, tweak. All right. So instead of having to go, duplicate layer, filter, sharpen, unsharpen mask, I just save that steps as an action, and I can just apply it at any time I want. All right. So now I have this layered TIFF file. All right. I've already saved it, but I saved it before I did this work, so I definitely want to save it again. Right. So I'll do Command S, shortcut for save. Command W for close. I'll close that one too. All right, and so now I have my HDR TIFF file here that is kind of the culmination of all the work that I had done on that series so far. Now, because that was in the Optic collection, which is synced to Lightroom Mobile, you can see up here in the corner, syncing one photo. So because I did all that work from right inside that collection, this new version is in the process of automatically being synced back up to the cloud and will, once that's done, appear on my mobile devices as well. So what happens when Lightroom is syncing like that? Well, what it has to do is, first it renders that smart preview version, and that smart preview is what goes up into the cloud, all right? And then once that hits the cloud, then it can start to appear on my mobile devices. All right, so while that's doing all that, looks like the syncing happened. Now it's going to start coming down upon us. So, clock is ticking, so I want to show you a couple other things. There's so much more I could show you, but I want to just kind of show you a few more outputs. So, imagine now we've processed all of these photos, all right? Put them in Lightroom Mobile collections, and we've done all kinds of stuff with them. The Creative Cloud Photography Plan, okay? This is one of the links I'll have for you at the end as a place to check out, okay? If you go to lightroom.adobe.com, all the photos that I've put up into the cloud, once I log in here with my Adobe ID, and this URL I'll make available at the end as well, all right, I can see that I have this nice little friendly welcome back Rob screen here, all right, and I actually have access now to the photos that I've already put inside of Lightroom Mobile, all right. Any collection I put in Lightroom Mobile, I can actually share, make it a public link, and I can email it to all of you, and you can all look at it. And if you were logged in with your Adobe IDs, you could actually like and comment on my photos, and that like and comment will sync back to my desktop catalog, and I'll see your comments and likes in my Lightroom desktop catalog. So if you want to share it with friends and family or with clients, there's some new opportunities for workflows there for just sharing this information out. It's not hosting that you need to pay for and not web stuff that you need to understand. You just need to create that collection in Lightroom Mobile on the desktop or in the mobile and share it out. Okay? But because it's already in the cloud, we can access it here too, if you wanted to. And we could actually go on this, click this Photos tab. We can see all those collections are here. And there's even a limited ability to edit now right from this web interface. If we saw something and went, oh, I needed to check the white balance on that or change something like that, we could actually even do some editing right through this web interface, similar to what we have in Lightroom Mobile. Right? This here, I'm going to guess, is that DNG HDR file that I just made. Another thing that's really cool is they're giving us these previews of this new technology that they're working on. All right, so this, if you enable this is optional. They're working on this image recognition technology that we can play with. It's not done, it's kind of like beta, but it's through this web interface. And we can come in here, I turned it on already, and I can do a search for things like animals. And now it's looking through the photos I put on Lightroom Mobile, and it's going to try and bring back photos that it recognizes have animals in them. Right? This is not using keywords, okay? This is not, this is using some other magic here. All right, and it did a pretty good job because my son's in them. And overall, pretty good. So there's some kind of magic going on there. That's pretty cool, and they're letting us have a little peek there. But it does other things. It can pull up on camera information. There's some metadata searching that happens and all that too. But there's some other stuff that's really cool that's going on there. All right, so on this page though, at the bottom, when I give you this link later, there's a lot of resources. Learn more. To learn more about all the things I've showed you so far, because I could not do any one of them justice in the little window of time that we had today. But this is a place you can go as the next part of your journey. All right, so we got all those pictures in the cloud, and we know now that we can access them on this lightroom.adobe.com. What else can we do? Well, part of this photography plan is this new thing that was called Slate like 5 minutes ago. Now Spark. And this is a really cool tool for putting together almost like a story. It's a web-based tool. It's accessible via the web. I can send you a link or put it on Facebook or something like that. And so I started to create one of these Spark pages on the show because I had all these images that I was putting in there, and I was starting to kind of put these things together. And what I have to give back to Adobe to prove that I was here were pictures of the things that I did. And Levon, will you take a picture of me up here now that you snuck in? Thank you. And just to show that, things happen. And so I put together this little Spark story. It's not finished yet because we're still talking here. Oh, see, and obviously I did not check for typos either. Never fails when you're doing a demo. It's when your worst typing comes out. So, again, running through my phone here, so we're a little slow, but this is, you'll hear it referred to as a glide show. And I just put in some copy and some images, and there's that great bus I'll be hopping on tonight. Here's my super big room. And it's a, kind of immersive way to kind of go through images with a little bit of text. And there's more that you can do. I could have included video. I didn't take any video for here. This was a photo I took with my phone. Hey, there's proof that I was standing behind the table. Proof that people came, and so on. All right. So I can keep building those out for all the collections that I have, or make new collections, down the road, and keep adding to these and editing these, and obviously getting my editor on board with helping me look at that stuff. All right. So that's one way, and this is just leveraging the photos that are in the cloud already. I'm not re-uploading new photos to this. Okay. So if we go back to the edit here, and let's just go down really fast to the bottom. This little plus sign here, I click on that and say, all right, let's add a photo grid. Sure. All right, I can upload photos. All right, I can pull photos if I had them stored in my Creative Cloud account, or I can pull them from Lightroom, I can pull them from Dropbox, I can pull them from a few different places. But staying on the theme of Lightroom, I'll see if I can access my Lightroom collections. And while that's coming along, I'll tell you about the next thing. All right, so the other option that you have available as part of this plan is this new product, relatively new, at least new to me, is called Adobe Portfolio. This also is a web-based app. Okay, it's not like an app you put on your phone or anything. This is something you just go to myportfolio.com, log in with that Adobe user ID and password again, and you can build a website, a portfolio website. All right, and as you probably will guess, the collections that you see here are collections that I had in Lightroom Mobile. All right, and so when I wanted to add a new project, click on Add New Project. We'll call it Optic 2016, and hit Create Project. And then it's doing its stuff on the back end. Now, I used to do web development. This is the easiest website I've ever built. I didn't have to know a lick of code or anything about web design. Didn't have to worry about what color space my images were in or anything like that, okay? Because I'm just pulling stuff that is sitting inside of Lightroom Mobile, and I'm really asking a lot of my phone. Here we go. I'm going to skip this step because I know where the photos are, and I'm going to pull them right from Lightroom. So again, another Adobe product. It's accessing photos that are already stored on their servers to bring into this other new project. All right, and doing it on your phone is slow. Here we go. All right, so go down Optic. And I'm just going to, for the sake of brevity here, I'm just going to select one photo so you get the idea. All right. For these galleries, you want to, it limits you to 20 photos for each gallery, right? And so, you know, pick between 10 and 20. Think portfolio. Don't think this is everything I've ever done. You think of it like the super best you've ever done and that you might want to show somebody, all right? And so Adobe Portfolio is all template driven. So from the very beginning, I happen to choose a template that I like. There's a few different ones you can choose. You can always change it later. Once you choose that template, you can edit it and customize it as you wish, right? And then the URL that you end up with, it's still working. So I'm being slowed down by the internet connection here on my phone. But the URL that you would end up with for this portfolio site would be your username.myportfolio.com. So robsylvan.myportfolio.com might be mine, okay? And that's great. You know, that might be fine because you're not paying for hosting. You don't have to have a domain. You don't have to know anything about all that stuff for putting a website together. Lightroom Desktop has the web module, okay? It's pretty powerful. It can do a lot, but it kind of stops short with the fact that you have to have your own website in order to actually fully utilize it, right? If you have your own domain and you have an FTP, then you can use the web module to upload stuff. The stuff's already on a server. It's just bringing it over and now making it available in a more consumable way than just sending it out there. All right, so here's this gallery in particular. All right, there's a lot of things. Anytime you see this little edit pencil means you can do something, okay? So if I had a bunch of photos here, I can reorder them. I can add alt text, which is the rollover text, the tooltip that you'll see. I could add a caption. I could change the width of the photos. I can change the margins. I can replace the image with something else, and so on. I can continue to add more media. I can add text. It's all very intuitive and very, if you ever use Squarespace, it reminds me a little bit of that. Very template driven, all web-based. So I built the website that you saw on the bus ride down. Okay, the bus had Wi-Fi. Didn't use my phone for that. And in less than 2 hours, I built this website. Now, one of the features of this you don't have to use, but if you do, it's there, was I had years ago registered robsylvan.com and never used it. Just had it pointing to one of my other websites. Inside of Portfolio is an option that you can choose. If you don't want my username .myportfolio.com as your URL, you can essentially make it point to your domain. And so now if you go to robsylvan.com, you see this Portfolio website that's entirely built with Adobe Portfolio, entirely populated with images that were in Lightroom Mobile, and I customize it and edit it on the fly, all through this web-based tool. So I don't need to learn Dreamweaver. I don't need to learn some other web-based tool. I can just focus on my photography, put photos that I want in a collection, sync them with Lightroom Mobile, And then when I have a moment, add that project to my portfolio gallery, and it goes on. Now, can't do e-commerce. I'm not selling prints here, all right? But I can add in a little bio page. All right, so I can add pages with just some text and some images. You can put links to other websites. So I have a link to my Lightroom blog on there. So you can do more, and you can, edit it as much as you, feel like you need to customize it to make it look personal. But I thought it was really easy. I thought it was actually kind of fun, and I was just like, yeah, that's a great way to utilize all this stuff that's already sitting out there on their servers to make it accessible to me as a customer. All right, so let's see if this Spark thing caught up with us. No, didn't catch up with us. All right, but you got the idea there. So I just want to say thank you very much for coming. I hope this is helpful. I'm going to put up, thank you.
Whether you're a hobbyist or a professional, B&H has the answers to your questions. Experience a world of technology at our New York City Superstore. Connect with us online or give us a call. Our staff of experts is happy to help.